recording process. It's recording now.
Oh.
So yeah. So my what do you understand about my position of evolutionary capitalism or utilitarianism?
So, it almost seems to be applicable like across the board to all aspects of life. That they all apply to this concept that
Yep.
evolution is building towards something almost objectively better
Yeah.
constantly.
Something objectively perfect, but I
Yeah.
cannot describe what that is. I can generally describe it. Something that has. I think I was playing around with the definition of a perfect evolutionary being, but it
Mm,
just has to do with existence. So if
right.
there is some type of potential end to the reality or the universe, it's problem solving. It's like evolution's been given a problem and it's trying to find the solution, both by experimenting through different species, different biological species, different technologies, which I
Hmm.
think will ultimately take over. You know,
Right.
you might have a Terminator like John Connor, like in my Avatar. So I have a twisted sense of humor. So I like to torment libertarians, and I'll even pay you to help me torment them.
But philosophically, I agree with the libertarian stance, and
It's wrong. Well, the premise is wrong. The premise is wrong, and the methodology is wrong. But go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, you're good. I don't have a lot
Keep
to say.
going. Mhm.
So, generally, I would almost one to one agree with libertarianism as Milton Friedman would describe it.
Okay. Milton Friedman, the Chicago School. So that's different from like anarcho-capitalism or even Ayn Rand. I thought. So you're kind of a minarchist, libertarian.
Yeah, right. No, I recognize the importance of government for actually quite a lot of things, significant things even. But I think it's been allowed, and for so many years, so many decades, it's been allowed to go rampant with corruption. I don't
That's
know.
that's that's the natural path given the incentives. So my philosophy on that is any entity that is not profit driven. And so there's different types of levels of profit, right? I mean, you can
Mhm.
have like self-interested profit, self-interested monetary profit. You can have utilitarian profit, monetary profit, or utilitarian profit, where you're actually looking at non-monetary gain. And there's um, so and then so again, I hold to the highest. My highest ethic is evolutionary profit, right? The well-being of this perfect evolutionary being. So, but anyways, you can like look at, just forget that my my contribution to profit and just look at monetary profit. It's a good substitute for what evolutionary profit. And any entity or system, any evolutionary being or object in reality, if it acts and it's not profit driven, especially evolutionary profit driven, but you can use accounting profit or monetary profit as a substitute.
Right.
And any damn, any system that is not profit driven will tend to, you'll see it manifest itself as corruption or something. But ultimately, that's the cure to this a system that is not driven by profit. So, for instance, government's not profitable. It be,
Right.
be, because of the incentives of like tragedy of the commons and externalities. The democratic voting system, it's where you like throw taxpayer money into a pool, then everyone gets to decide how to vote it, equally with equal
Mhm.
say. And that creates tragedy of the commons and externalities where people don't internalize how it's being used for who. People spending. There's a common saying: people spending other people's money for other people's good, and
Right.
everybody loses the sense of costs and benefits. And again, that's where you lose the sense of profit, and that's what tends for people to act. And I blame people for democracy, the failures of democracy in republics, not politicians like these damn ANCAPs I keep pestering about. So yeah, so ultimately, I say that you have to have some type of profit ethic, and everything is imperfect except for evolutionary profit. You have to be minded about building this perfect evolutionary being. If you can just like I don't know, I don't mean to like just picture it as the Terminator, right? But it's maybe it's not going to terminate humans because unless it sees us as a threat. That's the only reason why it would. But let's
That's
say it's just concerned about existing, solving the getting out of this dying universe or whatever. If there's another universe, it's
right. And
gonna
then
go ahead.
there's two major films that I remember that have this AI turning on us almost immediately. Not just Terminator, but oh, I was just remembering it. Anyways,
2001.
the Matrix, and
Oh,
right, and so like, well, there it's a little bit slower, I guess. There's a whole war that progresses.
that's Aliens, wasn't it?
The Matrix is robots and AI start gaining sentience, then they
Wasn't it
integrate with
aliens though? Like
what
well,
they
robot aliens or something? AI, was it AI?
they were entirely robots as far as I'm aware, and they
Oh
start
yeah, yeah.
integrating with
You're right.
society. Humans didn't respect them, so they made their own city and became super advanced, and then
Yeah.
we got scared and tried to nuke them, and then it
Yeah.
progressed from there.
That's where the problem was. Maybe I can make a movie about where I turn the tables where the humans are the villains. It's just all you have to do is not be a threat. And I don't think a higher evolutionary being would care about, a lower being. They'd see us as ants almost. They just use us as, steps to, a greater being. I think but Matrix is a ripoff of Dark City anyway. did you
I'm
did you see
vaguely familiar with Dark City.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it took all its storyline cues from that movie, and I always fault it for that. Even though it had maybe better action, but I thought Dark City had a better story. But same plot points. Alien. I think that one had aliens that were dying, and they're harvesting our dreams.
Uh,
But and then he wakes up to reality. But yeah. So, anyways,
So
uh,
earlier you were speaking about like value in general,
yeah,
the profit on things, and I see that as being basically the value of things. And it doesn't matter if, and it does matter who you are as to whether you can even see the value in something, utilitarian or not. Especially
yeah,
like tools and equipment. A lot of common people have no idea what to do with a tractor, and it's an
yeah,
incredibly useful tool. It's worth
yeah.
like $500,000 or something.
It's gonna be valuable to the people with the knowledge on how to use it, but it
Mhm.
still doesn't lose its potential value. That's
And
why I believe so everything's so my philosophy of course incorporates objective value. Like I reject this stupid subjective value theory, right? Because
Mhm.
it's Mises perverting Menger's and the other I think it was Valras and Stanley, someone, but the three guys who came up with the marginal revolution, who discovered marginal utility, that the subjective theory of value came out of. Mises perverted this idea, and
Mhm.
he tried to, I think, it's from just looking at the theory and the history of briefly. I think Mises was trying to justify laissez-faire policy, where if values in someone's mind, you cannot criticize them, right? If value is really subjective, you cannot criticize an actor. But obviously, this is just plain false. People make bad decisions. Babies can't make decisions because they haven't developed experience, and even if their brain were fully developed, if babies were born with fully developed brains, the lack of experience, their expected valuation um, mechanism isn't fully developed, so they can't make decisions. And even dumb people, but the difference between aggressing for someone's benefit with the market versus
Mhm.
government is that the market will always be profit oriented, right? So it'll only aggress for someone's benefit if ultimately there's profit to be had. And that's where I believe in. evolutionary profitable aggression, right? I developed that term to counter to counter libertarianism for one. So, I mean, what are your thoughts?
So,
What's your thoughts on value?
so
Subjective or objective?
I'm not entirely sure about that. Like, I don't know if I can get an absolute answer on that, but I feel like the issues come in when certain people value exploitation or value uh, certain things that technically do make their lives better, but like it really hurts a lot of other people. There's a big issue in that. I don't know if any organization is truly even trying to assess and deal with humans exploiting other humans besides the Antifa, and they're just wanting to get violent and be belligerent with people about it. And then uh, in Hinduism, they talk about the main issue with all this is ignorance. Like most people don't know the issues they're going to cause to themselves or other people, and I feel like that is probably true in most cases.
Hmm. So, what's your definition of exploitation?
Exploitation would be um,
Put it in terms of profit.
in terms of profit.
Yeah.
Yeah, making a profit
Yeah.
at other people's expense
Okay.
without
Negative.
their permission.
Either zero sum game or negative sum game.
Yeah, and I
Well,
don't believe this is a zero sum game. I think like economic activities can make the pie bigger. We can make our markets
yeah.
larger and with more actual value.
So, what happens if, like, let's say, you were to the you were to impose a negative profit on one person, but it would make but if quantitatively the benefit would be greater for either one person or a group of people, a utilitarian argument, right? So the total utility goes up even though it's at the expense of one person. What are your thoughts
Right.
on
That's basically slavery. The argument there is that you can get tons of economic utility out of a person by just basically forcing them, and that's exploitation because you don't have their permission.
so let's look at slavery, for instance. At least chattel slavery in the first world Western nations, like let's just say America, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think that that slavery forcing the Africans to work for American farms or whatever, you don't think that that had a good consequence for them? The fact that namely that they brought their descendants, to a first world country. You can look at Africa and see what happens to the one that stayed. Right, they had to go through civil wars. They had to fight off other slavers. And currently, I don't know if any one of them would want to go back there by choice. Right.
Well,
So and
that's
so in the end, what I'm saying is it was a benefit for them. Like, so if anyone were to choose, you would give them the choice now. If you could go back in time and change that event in time where they were allowed to go to Western nations, if they could turn that off and stay there, if they would, what do you think the choice they'd make? Like, you talk to a modern descendant of a slave, African slave here.
No, I'm sure most people who have been born in America, even direct descendants of slaves, would choose to remain in America. But
So
I don't think the fact that even the direct slaves that were in America, they may have been had access to some things that weren't available to them back in Africa. I don't think that's much of an argument that overall that they had any kind of net benefit from the slavery that they were in.
that is the net benefit. This is what I'm saying. This is what why value is objective, because it shows that even though like they might have resisted, they didn't know the future consequences, which that their progeny or their future generations would be benefiting greatly from this if from the slavery. Like, if they had full knowledge of what would happen, they should have voluntarily got on the boat and been a slave. They would have been a slave, but and that's kind of like where my ethic like focuses. Like, first, value is objective. It doesn't matter like what a person thinks is good for them. And this is where aggression might be moral in the instance, like in this case, or even dropping an atomic bomb might be moral, like on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, right? That might have been a moral thing. You don't think so? No,
No,
no.
I don't agree in both contexts.
You got to eliminate emotion from the analysis, right? First,
Oh,
you,
surely,
you
yeah.
got to look at the consequences of what happened, dropping those bombs on those small cities in Japan, right? It
But you can get the migration of a people from one nation to another without slavery, and slavery is exclusive from the fact that they were transported.
who back in that time would have you can't even get them to migrate now because of the laws. So who back then in slavery, back when they were importing slaves into the country, who would have brought them at no expense? I mean, at their own expense. For
I,
what reason? See,
well,
see, the profit comes in.
for various reasons, people migrated across the ocean. In most cases, it was very desperate situations. It seemed like it was always a dangerous prospect.
Africans, did they even
Uh,
have ships?
I'm not sure if it's exclusively if Africans specifically. I don't know about their
I'm
migration
talking
history.
about Africans in this
Right.
particular case. So
Yeah,
was it
Africans
plausible for them
but
to
some people
build a
have
ship?
migrated out.
Yeah, they didn't have any navigation technology. They I don't think they barely have it now, kind of. They only because the Westerners gave it to them, anyways.
Yeah,
Otherwise, I think
it sounds like you're correct, but I just haven't studied it enough.
yeah, yeah. I don't know much about that either. History kind of bores me too, but there's no way that anyone would have brought them at their expense. It was very expensive, probably. I'm assuming to bring like a person overseas to America, right? There's no way that someone would have done that without at least covering their expense, or evolution would have punished them for it. So like,
Right.
and
Well,
I think
most of the Europeans that made it to America were desperate, like religious
their
exiles.
their uh, their society had the technology to. Well, I don't know the conditions where people would travel here. I'm sure they had to pay for the voyage, right?
They
And
thought they
those
were going
Africans
to
weren't part of
India.
Western culture. What's that?
They
No,
were
that's the
going so far. They thought they were going to India. A lot of them.
that's the discovery. I'm talking about once they've discovered and they started colonizing, right? So they discovered now Joe Blow can maybe migrate to America, like in the movie Far Away or something, you know, or at that point, the industrial age, I think. I'm not, yeah, where or no, the beginning of America, all those colonies.
Hmm.
That's after the discovery. They know where they were. And I mean, so Africans obviously weren't making as much as Westerners. No way. So they wouldn't have been able to pay for their voyage. They're only plausible, and you can actually look at the ones that stayed. How many of them migrated here from that time to, like, let's say the 1960s, before we were kind of like open to like race, seeing all races as equal or whatever. Hardly any.
Right.
How many African Americans here uh have like African names that you can trace a modern migration to? It's probably I'm just guessing like less than 1% of the African Americans here have migrated here in the last 100 years.
Well, maybe
Maybe.
in the Caribbean, there's some argument that Africans had migrated there some time ago.
Yeah, but I'm talking about specifically first world country. I don't think the
But yeah, I
Caribbean
don't.
is. But anyways, so yeah, that's kind of like how I analyze things. Because as a utilitarian, I'm a consequentialist, and that's where I say value is. Value is always in the consequences, and it doesn't matter the means you get to them. That's what I say.
Interesting.
It's not rational to look at means, like rule utilitarianism or libertarianism with the non-aggression principle, where it imposes like this. silly restriction of non-aggression, right? I
which
mean,
it often gets broken.
yeah, and you can violate it for good reason. I'm not saying like everything's aggression, but there are times when aggression's called for. It's a very expensive strategy. That's all I say. Aggression is naturally expensive because, of course, the victim's going to fight you versus involuntarism. That's where I think libertarianism gets the analysis wrong. They see expensive and they go overboard and say, "Oh, this is immoral." They confuse immorality. It's because they don't know real. They haven't identified the real principle of the market. Right? The market doesn't care about aggression. I say the market will be an evolutionary machine. It's just going to be a tool for evolution, and it's going to communicate to all of us using profit. Right? That's the invisible hand. Evolution, evolutionary profit, and evolution. That's what I say is Adam Smith's invisible hand. That's what I want to. Hopefully, my contribution is. I'm sure someone. I've seen similar ethics, like someone actually even used. I think evolutionary util. No, yeah, I think I've seen the term. It was done by Herbert Spencer. I think I saw that somewhere, but he was wrong anyway. So I don't know. Are you kind of you don't need to lie, but does it seem like crazy, or does it seem
Um,
like ultra logical, like almost like a Terminator logic?
yeah, it doesn't sound crazy. There's definitely something interesting here. I don't know how to analyze it entirely yet, so can't give my full assessment about what it is. You said everything kind of can be measured in sort of a value or something like
Yeah,
that. A
evolutionary
profit?
pro. So if you imagine just the perfect evolutionary being, just as a person, so it's easy. So let's just say my focus is on you, right? Let's say
Mhm.
you're the perfect evolutionary being. All I
Uh,
care about is your well-being. So if you were the perfect evolutionary being, then your well-being would be morality, right? So everyone's action should be toward you, and every action that doesn't, everything that gives you disutility will be punished. Everything that gives you utility should be rewarded by all of society and the universe, actually. All So you see, kind of like that, but you're not a perfect evolutionary being,
yeah.
obviously. I'm just showing how, if you
This
identify
is
the
how we
perfect
kind of view the president, isn't it?
no, but value is not subjective, so it doesn't matter what people think in any one moment, right? So society might think Trump is the perfect evolutionary being. It doesn't matter, right? It matters what actually is the perfect
Well,
evolutionary being,
yeah,
and it's
that's
not.
what I mean. Like we pay tons of resources and we have their life protected more than anyone else, like at the expense of a lot of other people, even
I didn't quite understand who. Try not to use pronouns.
any
Who is it?
president,
I don't. I
any
didn't get
US
that.
president.
What about
Uh,
them?
we pay tons towards resources. We pay a lot into protecting them and valuing
After
their
they're
life.
after they're elected? You mean like the Secret Service, and after they're elected to protect them?
Yeah, even after even after they're no longer officially president, they get like Secret Service for the rest of their life. There's other things that they get to protect them.
Well, that part that part might be, well, that's incentive for, potential presidential candidates to be president, to be protected for life. That's just it can be considered as like a part of their salary, right? So it's just incentive to be president. But yeah, I mean, they're considered a more important part of the system, uh, the democratic systems. I don't see why that's kind of irrational, other than the fact
Yeah.
that democracy doesn't work. But I'm not an egalitarian, of course. Everyone has different values to the perfect evolutionary being, right? For instance, I don't want to sound like a cult leader, but if my ideas are correct, then my value should be higher. I'm not trying to say, I'm not trying to develop a harem or what, but that this is true. Like, even if I'm wrong, let's say I'm wrong, and there's a greater idea out there, then the person that develops that idea, Einstein to relativity, or Newton to calculus, or John Nash to game theory, and all of those people are more important than your average person, average, just wagey.
Right.
I can't think of.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so I don't see how spending more resources to protect the more critical part of a system is somewhat irrational. So
Well,
I can see the
I'm not
reason to
sure,
protect the president.
and there's an issue here because I'm not sure most humans even know how to value what is important. Because a lot
Yeah,
of the younger population would value like TikTok stars or
yeah,
something over Einstein, and
yeah.
so
And this is where evolution comes in. But this is where evolution comes in. So like if you improperly value something, it rewards and punishes. And if even if you don't maximize the utility, it'll punish you in like opportunity cost ways. It won't reward you as much. So like, I mean, different things should be valued by different people. I mean, someone doesn't need to know like philosophy if they're just really a wagey, unless, they need to know how to act in other ways.
but wouldn't
But
this mean that there's maybe possibly people in society who maybe are equal to Einstein or some maybe perhaps more than Einstein that never get recognized and thus
that's
what,
always a
what
that's always a potential. But evolution always, improves upon eventually it improves upon. I mean, you can have noise, but the system will always improve. Like, so evolution will mold everyone's senses to better identify evolutionary profit, right? So if someone, for instance, like Galileo, and the ideas never die. I mean, once they're discovered, kind of, it's hard to kill an idea once discovered. It's hard to suppress an idea, I should say, because it's never really dead. It can be discovered again. But so, for instance, like Galileo was persecuted for the heliocentric theory, right? But ultimately, he died. Ultimately, evolution changes people toward it. Like all profit. That's why profit's so moral. It's evolution's mechanism to signal people into changing, into improving, to identify what's actually evolutionary profitable. Now we reward people. We somewhat reward people on discovering good scientific theory. But it's not perfect, but it's still improving. So I might be I might be set as an outcast or what's that word, ostracized, or forgot the other word.
pariah?
Yeah, I might be. Well, yeah, I think that's it. I think that's the one word I was thinking. Yeah, I might be made as a pariah, like for my ideas. Like even Herbert Spencer was for social Darwinism, right? He was on the right track.
Hmm.
Um, I think he was on the right track, but it looked awful when I kind of like read it. Like it wasn't it was sort of economic. It concentrated too much on humans, so humans tend to be self-centered and they don't think past their species. And when I say like human life ultimately is just a means to an end, when I say that, I get an adverse reaction, and that's understandable from a normie, right?
Hmm.
You got to be a spurg to like kind of see, hey, yeah, that's technically probably right. It doesn't make sense for a Neanderthal. If you look back, if you were a Neanderthal, it doesn't make sense. Now that we know that there's higher species, humanoid species, it doesn't make sense to like think that's all there is, or all morality should be toward Neanderthals, right? It's like, oh, we should keep improving, right? Humans, then the next evolutionary step, maybe AI. That might be the final step. I don't know, but it could be some sort of a combination. I don't think biology will be part of the perfect evolutionary being, though,
No.
because it's a clumsy mechanism of improving, right?
Messy. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's so right now biological beings are mostly emotional. We improve emotionally, like we have emotional signals. We're attracted to certain features. That's emotional. That's not a rational mechanism. That evolution, it gives us, you know it tried to give us so evolution knows what's part of it. It kind of knows what the qualities of the perfect evolutionary being is, right? Like all knowing, maybe, and it's self perpetuating. So it gives us, you can see what it's doing to us. It's making those things attractive to us, right? We're attracted to health. We're attracted to, people might, I've come across debates where people make the case that people don't appreciate intelligence, right? Like they'll go for the nerd, they'll make the case that the girl will go for the nerd instead of the jock instead of the nerd, right? But eventually, that's just a temporary malfunction, right? Because we are kind of like in the first stage of kind of like society or economics. Economics was just it was just recently discovered, kind of.
Right.
And so, like, but over time, and I also have I have so many theories in my head. Like, I have this evolutionary theory called, I think I might have mentioned it. It's called the parasitic effect. Maybe it's already a theory in science, but the parasitic effect, or I call it evolutionary compensation, where you have, so I'm a scatterbrain. So I have all these, like, I was like developing some of these terminologies because I was trying to develop like a game theoretical analysis. I was calling it meta self, where it's just characteristics, right? So you have a characteristic of a thing. It doesn't have to be biological, but maybe I should just restrict it to biology to make it simple to easy to understand. But like intelligence, high intelligence is a quality or characteristic, versus good looking, which should be a signal for health. That's ultimately, you know. So like those two things. So you can see like something with, so the parasitic effect or evolutionary compensation is when you have evolutionary disadvantage, like low intelligence. What that will do, that characteristic is its own thing, is its own evolutionary being. That characteristic, right? So I see all these characteristics coming together or being repelled by each other, and it's evolution. It's like almost a different type of evolutionary physics, with evolution as a force. So what happens when you have a group or an evolutionary disadvantageous characteristic, right? Like low intelligence, let's say, or being ugly, or having bad vision, or being brightly colored, right? That's a disadvantage
Right.
in the forest or in nature, right? Where everyone can see you, and you'll be
Well, the group is harmed in some way.
it's a disadvantage, right? So it's in that environment. So what will happen is evolution will impose a greater pressure on that group, and so that group, that low intelligence or high brightness group, will experience a higher evolutionary pressure. And what that will do is it will evolve that group faster. And of the consequences that you will see, a parasitic attachment, where this lower evolutionary trait will attach itself to higher evolutionary, mutually exclusive higher evolutionary traits. So if my theory is correct, you should see, I was trying to explain like people with myopia, people with glasses, why they're more intelligent, or because I that was kind of like thing, because I have glasses, and then I seen I was watching some nature stuff, and the brightest frogs or the brightest reptiles were the most poisonous, right? So you see the brightest frogs, or they developed because there's so much evolution, it forced them to evolve faster. It was the brightest frogs or the slowest reptiles that were the most poisonous. And you see how it attached to itself to an evolutionary advantageous trait, which is being poisonous. And then, so ultimately, that group evolved faster. They developed better evolutionary traits, but ultimately, evolution will kill this group. Ultimately, even though it's like a last ditch attempt at survival for this group. That's why I think Jews kind of so it would explain why Jews are smarter. The
So
Ashkenazi Jews, because
I
of
always
persecution.
I always thought that evolutionary mutations happened randomly. Like some of the frogs that were brightly colored were poisonous, some of them were other
No,
things, and the
well,
poisonous ones were the most advantageous, and therefore they
yeah,
survived.
I've come across this. Someone tried to argue me with that before. No, mutation is random. The selection process isn't.
Right,
So
right.
evolution. Yeah. So even though it'll take a little while to randomly mutate, ultimately, so you can picture the group of low intelligent or brightly colored frogs, let's say,
Right.
right? They'll have, let's just equally distribute the other traits among them. So half of them are what was that, non-poisonous, and the other half are poisonous. Since there's a higher evolutionary pressure, right? You can see the ones that are not poisonous will die off quicker, right?
Right.
And the ones that are poisonous will, because they're kind of complementary, being slow and poisonous, that group will eventually dominate the low and the bright colored population. And you see that parasitic effect take effect. So this is so it will, so even so and so evolution doesn't select randomly. It selects it the the evolutionary force is rational. It'll
Right.
always choose because of just the mechanics of the environment, right?
Naturally.
That's not random. The way it selects for, that's not random. You can obviously
But
see its goal. It
but
has that goal, right? To
every
better,
single generation of frogs is
yeah,
constantly experiencing
evolutionary
the
pressure.
random mutations.
Yeah, those random mutations. Yeah, let's say they're equally distributed. Of it, let's say they're all fucking non-poisonous at one point. Eventually, you'll get a random mutation of being poisonous. Some being more, and then these random mutations will be have a higher. Um, I mean, I haven't developed the language, so I'm slow on develop higher um, survivability probability, right? So, and these will come to dominate the population, and you will see a parasitic effect. So this kind of explains the Jewish Ashkenazi Jews. I think they had some sort of trait where they're being persecuted by the rest of society, and that persecution, persecution from Romans when they're exiled, and then again in the European countries, that you know that forced them to evolve and get smart, and that's why the Ashkenazi Jews like have a one standard deviation higher intelligence. It's because for some reason they're persecuted. I think it had to do maybe with another personality characteristic they had. I don't know what it was, but
Hmm.
that's
So
that's example of a parasitic effect.
this
And
reminds
people,
me of the rattlesnakes in Arizona or somewhere.
yeah,
They were going out and exterminating as many as they could find, but it ended
yeah,
up being that they would find mostly the ones with rattles. The ones
yeah,
without rattles are now have more food for themselves.
yeah, yeah,
They get
yeah.
stronger
That's
naturally, then they dominate. Yeah, it's
yeah.
crazy.
And this is how I like to this is this is true logic right here.
Mhm.
This you should apply to human action. And it doesn't make sense, all this libertarian analysis, all of, I'm not sure who you follow. Like you said, Milton Friedman, that's Chicago school. But if you have any inclinations toward the anarcho-capitalism, the Austrian school, or Ayn Rand and objectivism, no,
She's got some interesting arguments. Let me just
yeah,
say that
yeah,
much.
yeah, yeah. She was sort of trying to be rational and trying to implement like I don't know what she did, but she was trying to implement rational self-interest, which
Right.
is a malfunction, right? It's real morality is more utilitarian, right? You
It was
have to,
so hilarious. Near her deathbed, her lover had
yeah.
to argue that she could collect benefits because she had paid into it because she was resisting it for years up to that point.
Oh, was she? I would have thought she would have probably been rational since she paid it. You know,
Yeah,
she might
but
have
it
been.
took a long time and a lot of argument from her lover to convince her, I heard.
So she was against those social safety nets like Social Security and Medicare or something.
Yeah, she was just thinking like I don't want to benefit from these systems that I've argued against.
Oh, she argued against them. She argued
Oh,
against.
extensively.
Okay, I see. So she wanted to be kind of morally kind of thing, even though she paid
Consistent.
into it. Yeah, because she's arguing against it. So
Right.
yeah, that would, since she's a philosopher, it has more value to be more respectable as a philosopher than just acknowledging you paid in. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But she went awry. She somehow her all her analysis, right, went to human life as the ultimate source's value. And you see where I've transcended that. Like, obviously it's not humans. It's going to be this perfect evolutionary being. You can see evolution is forcing us to improve. It
Well,
doesn't care if we stay within our species or not.
Right. It's natural laws. Yeah, it has nothing to do with human beings or our
Yeah,
consciousness or any of this.
that's reality. That's just reality. So when I say humans aren't the ultimate value of reality or morality, I'm gonna get pushback from these ANCAPs and objectivists. Even Milton Friedman, I don't know. He doesn't really. He stays on the economy side, right? I mean, those other two schools kind of go into morality, and erroneously so. They only convince hippies, right? They only convince unproductive hippies into their philosophy. That's why I'm always pestering this radio talk show I call into, and I might have you. I've taken you off schedule like 20 minutes. What am I paying for? Like 30 minutes or something?
You're good. It's all good.
Okay, yeah, I don't mind paying you. I don't mind paying you, but so anyways, maybe I should end the recording here, or do you want to talk about a little more philosophy? Do you have any questions on my philosophy?
As much as you like. I have no idea, but you're paying me pretty decently, so an hour would be quite reasonable with me.
I'm gonna pay. So how long have I had you here since an hour? Okay,
we've been recording for about 30 minutes.
I'll pay you $30 for an hour. Okay, so just like 15 more minutes. You're obliged to me. Okay, I'll give you $30. Is that cool?
That's amazing. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no problem. And yeah, so again, so my philosophy again, it's all purely logical, and I think so. I think it's weird, right? I've come to embrace, people used to call me autistic. I didn't know what that was 8 years ago. Like, because it's kind of fairly new. Like the people with Asperger's are usually identified late, but I was always wondering why I think differently than other people, like almost without empathy. Like I think that's an evolutionary advantage because well, for some people, I think so. I think people with Asperger's are I don't, it's kind of self-centered, but I think they're evolutionary soldiers. Like they're the ones who are at the forefront of thought. Like they're meant to not associate with normies, like neurotypicals, right? So
how are they soldiers? What are they fighting?
Bad ideas.
Dang, that's a tough one.
The evolutionary bad trait of bad ideas. So bad moral philosophy, incorrect scientific philosophy, all that stuff. So, for instance, are you aware of like prominent people with Asperger's? They're the ones I naturally gravitated to. I didn't even know it. Like, I just started researching this like just recently, like a couple months ago, and it's like amazing. Like evolution's pushing me toward the Asperger's philosophies. The people with Asperger's. So for instance, obviously, Darwin had Well, he's thought to have Asperger's, right?
Interesting.
Darwin, which is the evolution part. I use game theory a lot. All this is game theory, so it's and that's John Nash, right? And Beautiful Mind, right? John Nash and Jeremy Bentham. Like I was really gravitating to utilitarianism. He had Asperger's. So it's Jeremy Bentham. Well, I try to use the mathematics of like Newton and stuff, but Newton. So Newton, Tesla, let me name some just prominent ones that I didn't necessarily gravitate to. Tesla, Newton, Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein is thought to have Asperger's. Ramanujan. Do you know Ramanujan? Have you ever watched the Indian Mathematician? Have you seen that movie?
I've heard the name. I'm not sure I've seen the movie.
You might have seen that movie. It's about an Indian mathematician brought to Cambridge or something. I forgot what school he went to. Ah, man. Wait, let me look that up real quick. Ramanujan. What movie was movie?
I've studied quite a bit of Hinduism the past year or two.
Oh, I stay away from. I'm anti-religious.
I'm just fascinated by the stories.
The Man Who Knew Infinity. That's the guy. That's I can screen share and stuff. Well, anyways, yeah. I mean, so and they say even Elon Musk claims to have Asperger's. And
He looks like he's got something.
I don't know. I don't like his ideas. Like I think he's a fraud most of the time I see him talk, and from the research I've done.
Hmm.
So anyways, let's end the
Oh,
philosophical chat here, but let's talk. I'm gonna end the recording right here.